Well, this year marks the centenary of the birth of Oliver Tambo. He was born on the 27th of October 1917. And to remember and acknowledge the life and legacy of Tambo, centenary celebrations have been underway throughout the year, building up to an event on the 27th, this Friday, which would have been his 100th birthday. As part of these celebrations, we'll be talking to people who knew the late former ANC President. And to start us off, I'm joined by former Minister in the Presidency, Essop Pahad. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so I want to start by asking you what it was like to know Tambo. I mean, you worked closely with him, you knew him and his family well, and maybe give us some background as to where you worked with him and what kind of work you did with him.
Let me say this, that for those who worked with Comrade President OR Tambo, it was the greatest privilege and honor. Comrade OR was a remarkable human being, an outstanding political figure, very humble. He loved music, he loved discussions, but he was also very difficult sometimes to work with. If you were writing speeches for Comrade OR, you must know that he would send it back to you with changes in a comma and a full stop and whatnot, because he was very meticulous in what he wanted to say and how he wanted it to be said. In my view, the greatest South African that has ever lived in the history of our country is Comrade President OR Tambo. He kept us together in exile under the most difficult conditions and circumstances. With all of the problems we had inside the movement and outside, it was Comrade OR that kept us together.
He must have been a formidable leader, as you say, to keep everybody together because people were either in prison or in exile. So to keep that unity and to keep the objective in sight when people could have given up, and he managed to do that.
And one of the reasons he managed to do that were two or three. One is Comrade OR always looked for consensus. When he was chairing a meeting of the National Executive Committee, and some of those executive committee meetings were very difficult, very robust, serious disagreements, Comrade OR would not speak. He would let everybody speak, and at the end, he would bring together all the different, even conflicting views and summarize them in a way in which then everybody accepted that that would be the consensus decision of the NEC. The second thing Comrade OR had, because he was a fantastic listener, he could put himself into the shoes of the other person or person that he was talking to. And in the end, even when he disagreed with you, the manner of his way he disagreed and the way he raised his arguments, at the end of it, you will accept what he says, but you will think that this is what you think. So and that was his great strength, that he had this great strength of just dealing with people from all walks of life. I remember when he used to come to London from Lusaka, and there used to be queues of people waiting to see him. Other people were coming to see them because they had family problems, others because there had some other problems, others because they wanted to discuss political issues. But I also think when we're discussing Comrade OR, we shouldn't forget Mama Tambo. Mama Tambo kept that family together, kept that house together, made it possible for Comrade OR to do his work without having to worry about what's happening to the children. You know, the children were in London. He was in Lusaka, traveling the world, and Mama Tambo played a very important role. That's the one. The second important role she played was that she was one of the leading people in the ANC in London. And she let you know if she thought you were doing the wrong thing. So she had no problem saying, "My son, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Can't you behave properly?" And so we must always link the two together, Comrade OR and Mama Tambo.
Well, they must have had an incredible partnership and an incredible marriage, and you got to see firsthand, probably more than most, what kind of partnership they had, what kind of marriage they had. And to be able to weather the storms of apartheid and to be separated like that, the way they were, and to live in exile for all those years.
Well, that's one of Comrade OR's remarkable personalities, that Comrade OR would deal with his own family affairs in a way in which it was always not conflictual. Now, Mama Tambo could be conflictual, but Comrade OR would always calm her down. But as I say, they strengthen each other. Now, I remember with Comrade OR, Thabo Mbeki and I, Thabo said to me in 1965, let's go and see Comrade OR. That time they were living in a flat. So we went. In London. And Thabo then said to Comrade OR, look, we want to set up an ANC youth and student section in London. Now, at that time, non-Africans were not allowed to be members of the ANC. This was only changed in Morogoro, 1969. But Thabo explained that we wanted to set up an ANC youth and student section in London to begin to project the ANC in the international solidarity movement. But there were not enough Africans there in London at that time to form a sizable group of people with people in the leadership of the youth and student section. And Comrade OR looked at him and looked at me and said, but Thabo, Essop, why have you come here? So I said, but no, Comrade President, you know we've come here for this reason. Do it. So he said, but what about the rest of the NEC? He said, that's not your problem, that's my problem. Go and do it, you're doing the right thing. And that was Comrade OR. When he thought it was the right thing to do, he would say, go and do it. And he would then deal with the fallout. He wouldn't expect you to deal with the fallout. And the same thing happened in Morogoro in 1969 when there were fierce criticisms of the leadership of the ANC at the time, very, very fierce. Comrade OR actually resigned because he said, well, if this is the view of ANC people and they think that I shouldn't be leading this movement, that's quite correct. We must find somebody else. Of course, he was then prevailed upon by people like Yusuf Datu and Joe Slovo and J.B. Marx to come back. And when he came back, he was unanimously elected the acting president of the ANC. So that was Comrade OR. You could be with him wherever you are. And it didn't matter who he was with. Because later in life, he met many heads of state. He met many leaders of industries. He met many people in the anti-apartheid movement. And there's not been a single occasion in which I was present when Comrade OR was meeting with these people that Comrade OR didn't, at the end, convince them about the correctness of our cause, about the correctness of our positions, about the correctness of our policy. And that's why I say that I'm very happy that this marking the centenary of his birth, because more and more, and that's why I'm glad you're also doing this program, millions of our people must get to know about this outstanding, outstanding son of our soil.
And his values, and what you say now about the fact that he was almost a reluctant leader when things weren't going well. When you look at the political landscape currently, what do you think Tambo would say?
Well, I think if we looked at us now, and by us I mean the African National Congress and the Alliance, I think Comrade OR would be extremely disappointed that we have not been able to adjust to the changing conditions and circumstances that we, and I say all of us, who are members of the ANC, have not been able to deal with the factionalism that is so rife in the organization now, that when you go in and looking for leadership positions, you know, we were brought up by Comrade OR and them not to seek leadership positions. They said, listen, if you do your work and they think you're good enough, you will be put into positions of leadership. So I think Comrade OR would be greatly disappointed that those of us who are in the ANC have not been able to deal with this serious crisis facing our movement in the way that he thinks we should have been able to deal with it.
In your opinion, are there any leaders left today that espouse his morals and his values and his humility, his leadership?
No, that's very difficult to say, because then I'm entering a factional battle inside the ANC about who must be leaders of the ANC. All I would say is that anybody who desires to lead this organization and to be elected president of the ANC in December of this year must just reflect upon the life and times of Comrade OR, about the life and times of Madiba, about the life and times of Walter Sisulu, about the life and times of Yusuf Dadoo, of Lilian Ngoyi, of J.B. Marks, Moses Kotane. You know, we've been very, very lucky in South Africa that we produce some of the greatest leaders we have seen. And therefore, all the greater sense of pain that at the time when we most need a very mature, conscious, honest, open, truthful leadership, we don't seem to have it. So no, I don't want to give names because then you're part of a faction. All I'm interested in is that somehow or the other, those who presently occupy positions of leadership in the ANC must find the way and the means to bring us together again, to get the ANC united and cohesive. If not, I think we'll be in serious trouble in 2019. And that, people must understand this thing. You know, for the ANC to lose, it's just not the ANC, it's the people of South Africa, it's the people of this region, in the continent, and progressive humanity, because ANC, people still throughout the world look to the ANC for leadership, progressive leadership on many international issues. And so what we're talking about is a great, great, glorious movement, which I'm afraid if they are not careful, the present leadership, that they will contribute to the demise of this glorious movement. And that would be painful to all of those leaders, but also I think above all, to so many of our people who sacrificed their lives so that we could live in a democratic, non-racial, non-sexist and prosperous society. What are we doing to honor all of those who gave their lives? And I think this is what the ANC, people who want to become leaders of the ANC, this is a question they need to ask themselves. Am I good enough to lead this glorious movement? Am I good enough to be somebody who people can look and say, yes, these are the people who are going to keep us together, to make sure that the ANC remains true to the values that have underpinned the way we've worked, the discipline that was instilled in us from the time when we were young, the commitment. And I think that, for me, is the most important thing. And that, for me, would be the disappointment that so many of our great leaders would have of the kind of problems with crisis we're facing both in the ANC as well as in the Alliance.
Thank you for sharing your
thank you
memories
for
and your
inviting
thoughts.
me.
Former colleague and friend of the late OR Tambo, Essop Pahad, thank you very much for your time. We'll take a short break. Do stay with us. Some international news coming up next.